The holiday season is filled with joy and cheer, connecting with one's loved ones, and filled with traditions. But it is also filled with dread. Dread of making sure you get everyone gifts, you don't forget anyone, decorations, obligations. Let's be honest, the holiday season is a lot of work. And one of the most taxing, busy work during the holidays is replying to everyone. Making sure you don't forget anyone and show people you care, even when you are tired and just want to crawl underneath the covers and be left alone. Well, you're not the only one. And in fact, the feeling of, I don't want to do this, is a bit where the Christmas card came from. And in this episode, we dive down the chimney and see where the traditions of Christmas cards come from and how they almost disappeared. Our tale technically starts in the 1600s, though I will put an asterisk on this because it may be the first Christmas card by a technicality. The year is 1611 AD, and a man by the name of Michael Mayer would send a large manuscript to King James I of England and his son, the Prince Henry Frederick. The manuscript would be nearly 3 feet by 2 feet, the size of a small poster. And Michael himself was a German advisor, as well as a physician and alchemist, to the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II. So I imagine he sent the manuscript as a sign of respect and to keep relationships between the two kingdoms. The manuscript itself would have multiple poems written on it, detailed, elaborate drawings on it, and the words written, and I quote, "A greeting on the birthday of the sacred king, to the most worshipful and energetic lord, and the most eminent James, King of Great Britain and Ireland, and defender of the true faith, with a gesture of joyful celebration of the birthday of the Lord in the most joy and fortune, as we enter to the new auspicious year, 1612. End quote. So on a technicality, this is the first Christmas card. But it's not really the first Christmas card. That wouldn't happen for a few centuries. The first official Christmas card would have its beginnings in the mid-1800s in Britain, with a man by the name of Sir Henry Cole. A little background: Sir Henry Cole worked as a government worker. He was one of 4 senior assistant keepers, which sounds like not the greatest position, but his job was to reform government record keeping, as well as organize the previous government records. So powerful, but it also sounds awful. Even with that monumental task of reorganizing government paperwork, Henry still had enough free time to help reform and set up the Public Record Office, which would eventually turn into the Post Office. He was the driving force of creating the British penny post, which will be important to how Christmas cards came to be. The penny post was a massive change to the postal system. Henry, along with a few others, fought to lower the cost of postage for letters down to the cost of a single penny, hence penny post. Henry believed all British citizens, no matter their economic situation, should be able to afford the mail. The penny post was massively successful and used all throughout the United Kingdom, which the penny post saw its biggest use during the holiday season. For in Britain, it was common tradition to send people you know and love a letter for Christmas and for the New Year. It was also tradition to reply back to those letters, and it would be considered impolite not to do so, which seems utterly taxing to me. Then the year 1843 rolls around, a few years after the penny post had been created by Sir Henry Cole. Being an aristocrat, businessman, and a man with some influence, would receive a lot of letters. More than likely received more than he normally would have gotten before his help in the creation of the penny post, which I find funny. But Henry received a lot of letters, and I do mean a lot. Rumor has it, a couple hundred. A couple hundred that he has to not only read, but also write a custom letter back. During the holiday season, when he's already a busy man, and let's be honest, Majority of his letters he probably didn't care about to begin with. Well, staring at all these letters, and in my mind, rubbing his forehead as a pile lays in front of him, thinking out loud in a posh British accent, I don't want to do this. This is dumb. I have better things to do than deal with these silly things. Well, something happened while staring at all those papers, dreading to have to reply to all of them. An idea occurred to him. A thought. A way to streamline all the replies he has to do. Henry decides to act on his idea and pay a visit to his friend, John Calcote Horsley, who, at the time, was a pretty accomplished painter. Henry came to his friend and asked him to make an illustration that he thought of. The illustration would be a family at the table sharing their glasses of wine together, and on each side, different illustrations of people helping the poor. The drawing turned out fantastic, and Henry loved it. He thought it was the perfect illustration of the Christmas holidays, and, more importantly, a way to get out of replying to hundreds of letters. He next took the illustration to a London printer and made thousands of copies on a cardboardish material. 2,050 in 2 batches to be exact. The prints, slightly bigger than 5 inches by 3 inches, about the size of an index card. I imagine the size had to do with the cost of printing and the machine's capability at the time, but also, along with the illustrations printed on the sheets, so too was the text, "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you." And something I find most important also was printed was to, T-O, followed by a colon and an underline. A blank space so he could fill in the name he needed. Pretty ingenious if you ask me. The most proficient way to be lazy, and I love it. Well, Henry didn't need all 2,000 cards, so he kept some for personal use, some for letters that he needed to respond to, and then he decided to sell the rest for $1 each. $1, today's money, I found conflicting conversions on cost, but either way, $1 was pretty cheap. Cheap enough where many people bought the printed Christmas cards, and made old Henry quite a profit. After sending out his newly fashioned Christmas cards and selling the excess cards, all of them were met with high praise. Many people loved it. Though some people, a few minority, didn't like the image of the family drinking wine together. Goes to show, no matter when or where you are, you can't make everyone happy. So, the winter of 1843 was when the first Christmas card was made, sent, mass-produced, and sold. Talk about efficiency. But it doesn't end there. In fact, the Christmas card now being created would start to morph and change, even be changed by Henry himself. Having his cards so well praised and a little extra coin in his pocket, Henry decided to do it again the following year, changing the cheering wine, and then do it again, and then again, and the year after that. By 1846, the newly formed creation, the Christmas card, that Henry made just a few years earlier, was almost a common thing in Britain. In 1846, his Christmas letters increased the amount of mail in Britain by 11.5 million cards. Soon, other people wanted to get in on the creation of Christmas cards, and the profits that came with it. By the late 1850s and early 1860s, entire businesses were dedicated to making Christmas cards. So many people were producing cards and had so many options, the price of a Christmas card dropped from $1 to half a penny. By the early 1870s, people were fascinated with Christmas cards and started to make cards for other holidays and other occasions. One of the biggest ones at the times were greeting cards. And because of that, business was booming. And because it was booming, it was slowly starting to spread to other countries, mainly Europe, especially Germany. And with Christmas cards now spreading, more artists started to get involved, creating amazing art for Christmas cards. Then an artist by the name of William Egley made some art for Christmas cards. For those who don't know that name, because I didn't, William Egley was one of the artists who drew some of the illustrations in Charles Dickens' books. So a talented, well-off artist. And fun fact, Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol and Christmas cards were both made in the same year. Anyhow, once William started making art for Christmas cards, it opened the floodgates, and artists were now making entire careers on just making art for cards, whether it be Christmas, greeting, or any other type. As Christmas cards spread across Europe and more businesses formed, so too did it spread across the Atlantic Ocean and make it to America. In 1873, an immigrant, Louis Prang, a German or a Prussian, I saw conflicting information on his native country, started to produce Christmas cards in America. It was a big hit. By the next year, Louis Prang's Christmas cards were the most successful and popular of all card production in America. It is unclear if he knew about Henry Cole's Christmas cards or knew about them from when he was in Europe, but Louis did put his own twist on Christmas cards compared to his European counterparts. Instead of doing religious or people on the Christmas cards, Louis did a lot of unique ones with animals, natures. A big one he did would be with flowers. Louis would also have an ingenious method of getting new artwork for his Christmas cards. He would hold the first design challenge for Christmas cards. Why do the work when you get others to do it for you? He would put a panel of judges together, famous artists, art critics, and architects to judge the entries and bestow prizes to the winners. The first competition he held had 800 entries, which again, this is the 1870s. So to me, 800 is a lot, and how much effort was put into them is just jaw-dropping and stunning. Louis would be successful. Louis would be so successful, he'd make about 5 million cards a year in the 1870s. You know how ridiculous that is? It's just crazy to think about. But the good times can't last forever. In a few years, Louis would lose his monopoly on Christmas cards, and other businesses started to get involved. Because so many people love Christmas cards, so too did so many people try to capitalize on the craze. Because of that, the market got flooded. Louis would end up going bankrupt, and by the 1890s, cards would fall out of favor and many businesses would go under. Though, a footnote, in 1891, the first personalized Christmas cards were made, more of a gimmick than a business adventure. It was a photograph showcasing Annie Oakley, the American sharpshooter, which she was the one who made it when she went to go visit Europe and brought a photo of herself. For the rest of businesses in America, they basically all went out of business. That'd be for two reasons. The first being German lithographers. They started exporting in much cheaper Christmas cards, and there was no money to be made in competing this new technology. Secondly, Americans had fallen in love with a new holiday fad. Instead of Christmas cards, gimcracks, or sometimes called doodads, which were cheap jewelry or figurines that could be sent to a friend or loved one instead of a Christmas card. Christmas cards at this time almost became a gimmick as soon as doodads came around, which is a weird sentence to say out loud. The Christmas card would still be around, in the shadows, occasionally being used, but slowly disappearing. That would be until Joyce Hall, along with his brother Raleigh Hall, started making Christmas cards. You see, World War I had just broken out, and the Hall brothers saw a need for a cheap, easy letter that could be sent back and forth to the front lines. So, by 1915, the brothers made a Christmas card to fit that need. They would make a Christmas card that we basically all recognize today, the standard Christmas card size, about 4 inches by 6 inches. And because of that size and convenience, the Christmas cards by the Hall brothers were used a lot during the war, which caused the size of the Hall brothers' business to grow. Because of this growth, they would change their company name from Hall Brothers Company to what it is called today, Hallmark. And like many habits society formed during World War I, the commonality of using Christmas cards happened to be one of them. The habit by the troops and their families would continue the practice of sending Christmas cards even after the war ended. Their popularity would take some time off, but would once again boom in 1949 and into the 1950s when charities started to use them. Charities figured out that they could use Christmas cards around the holidays to cheaply and efficiently ask thousands of people for donations. Clever. Then, in 1953, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower issued the first official Christmas card, and once the U.S. president got involved, everyone fully adapted the custom, and it quickly became a staple in many countries. As for the size, for the most part, Christmas cards haven't changed since the Hull brothers, but the artwork certainly has. As the 20th century continued onward, so too did technology, along with implementing that technology in Christmas cards. Cameras, holograms, songs, the list goes on. People started to make custom Christmas cards with printers and pictures, and with early computers. At one time or another, basically every type of art would find its way onto a Christmas card. Then this thing called the internet got into the hands of the public, which did change Christmas cards a bit. Less are sent, electronic Christmas cards are now a thing, but the traditional Christmas cards are still around, and many still send Christmas cards how Henry Cole did in the 1800s. And even with the internet, it doesn't seem like Christmas cards will be going away anytime soon. Yes, they are slowly declining, about 5% a year, but there is still about $1.5 billion in sales in America each year in Christmas cards, let alone with the entire world's total. But that is the story of how Christmas cards came to be. A man, Henry Cole, did not want to do a bunch of boring, laborious work, so he decided to mass produce and streamline his response by creating Christmas cards, which would end up becoming an entire industry, which I find hilarious. I also find it interesting, like stamp collecting, there's apparently Christmas card collecting, which I had no idea about. And I also find it funny enough that Henry's original Christmas cards are basically the holy grail in Christmas card collecting. So this holiday season, no matter who you are or what you believe in, send a card or a letter to a loved one. Be kind to one another. And remember, it's a lot easier to send a Christmas card than it is to write a custom letter. And you have Henry Cole to thank for that. And with that being said, thank you all for listening.